Good evening, everybody. Good evening. How are you all doing? All right, nice crowd, nice crowd. If there's anybody that doesn't have a seat right now, there are a couple of little movable ones up the top, some white ones, and there is some room down the front here that you could move them down to. And if anybody has an empty seat that they're not saving for somebody, raise your hand and perhaps we can get someone comfortable. Thank you for helping. I'm going to start with a little disclaimer this evening because we do have a great group of kids in the audience tonight. So parents, if there's anybody who needs a refund, if your child hears a swear word in the film later, we will give it to you. And I'm warning you now, it's not prolific and there's no like brawl scenes or anything wild, but there are some very colourful characters that occasionally bust a word out. So, fair warning. Well, about a year or so ago, I was in New York with Vans, and I had the good fortune of seeing the premiere of Bones Brigade. I'm not a skater. I really don't know much about the whole lifestyle in the sport, but I've got 3 boys, so I have been around it. But by the end of the film, I felt like I had a connection, and I was so impressed with the characters that I'd seen who were part of Bones Brigade, and in particularly, I was really impressed with Rodney. He just seemed to be a unique character who was very well thought out, very deep thinking, and who obviously had a depth of character that spans well beyond a board with 4 wheels on it. And, you know, I've been doing this job up here for a couple of years, but there came a question time at the end of the film in New York, and I really wanted to ask one, and I was so nervous that I didn't. So I walked out of the theatre and I said, one day I'm going to get that guy over to Hawaii and we'll do a talk. So I'd like to thank Rodney for agreeing to come tonight. And I'd also like to thank Vans and Stacey Peralta and George Powell for allowing me to show the film tonight and share that with you. So a round of applause for them. So let's welcome our guest this evening, Mr. Rodney Mullen. Thanks, Rodney. Welcome to our little Surf of the Bar stage. It's good to see you.
So glad to be here. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to open by... I'm actually going to apologise to you, Rodney, because I don't think I could have taken you further from your natural element. The North Shore is not known for sidewalks. It's not known for smooth paved surfaces, and this must be kind of torture for you to be hanging for the week with us here with not much to skate. So thanks for doing it.
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad I found a little spot and everyone's so nice to me. It's great.
Well, how did you discover skateboarding? Because you were about 10 years of age. What was it that caught your eye and got you into the sport?
I had always played some regular sports, team sports. And there was a guy down the street, and he was always kind of aloof. And he just did his own thing, and he had such a flow about it. And I was thinking, man, I don't want people telling me what to do or how to swing. I feel awkward, you know, I'm just doing my best, and I want to do it my way. And I just liked how he was, and I remember I tried his board, and there was just something about it. I was thinking, this is me. You know?
When you started getting your whole skate groove on, what was it about the feeling and the movement that really struck a chord within you and sort of set that connection off?
I think they're profound questions. In fact, there's a kind of soil, I think, that we all have in terms of our character, something resonant we recognize. It's funny how I recognized it as a kid. As soon as I picked up a board, I was thinking, this is for me. And it's strange, you know, as I get older, and I had the arc of winning a lot of contests and meeting some of the characters that I always wanted to meet, and just getting that nod from the professionals that you respect most, that means more than a whole sort of stadium lighting up, you know? And once I had gotten those things, it's easy to get lost in a sense of achievement or winning a certain number of contests in a row, which I did. And I remember one of the things after I lost just one contest in all the years that I did it. I had the title, I think, 36 times. And I remember not even caring about winning. It was just, don't lose, you know? And I lost. And I'm thinking, wow, what does that mean? And was it that my peers would reject me? why was I so spun up about winning all the time? You know? And I remember I got taken back to a place called Kenterbanks that I had seen 1,000,000 times in the magazines that had all the famous guys. And I remember skating along there and realizing those are the images. Now the same guys were shooting me that day. And it really brought me back to this is why I did it to begin with. And it was so profound to me that it was the day after I lost the contest. So how I recognized that from the very beginning, I don't know. But I know one thing is give kids more credit in general. They know what they want, usually, you know? Here I am.
Well, I know that you had a challenging upbringing. You had some incredibly talented parents and no shortage of good genes there in terms of ability and such a cross-section of fields. But your creativity seems boundless, yet your approach to skating was very regimented. You timed your sessions, you had specific goals, and this went on for years. So how does it work, that balance between that really multi-dimensional creativity and the control?
It's another profound question, and it's just structure. Because you ever think about this idea of what is freedom, you know? We always want freedom, but we see lots of evidence, profound, horrible evidence, that the more so-called freedom that people have, the more they become a slave to the things that they would desire. And I think anything, call it a creative force within us, that it has to be nurtured by structure. And in fact, I think some of the more creative people, there is a kind of finding comfort in discomfort. When you pour yourself into situations that offset you, that make you not comfortable at all, that's what drives me sort of on the outskirts, because that's the nature of creating something new, is pushing outside. Like, whatever I do, I can't do what I did, you know? And so I keep always a structured sort of environment where I try to be outside of a comfort zone and not too many eyes on me. Because I think it's my internal pride or fear of failure or all the above that make me think when I'm around people, I don't do what it takes to create something, which is fall all the time, you know? And so anyway, so I'm very structured in how I go about it, but it does take a balance, you know?
I've heard of a theory, for some of the kids here, I've heard of a theory of 10,000 hours, that if you want to be an expert at whatever you choose to do, that 10,000 hours is around about the time investment that it takes at a skill to really master it. Would you agree or disagree with that?
I think like all these things, it's a huge generalization that you can always find exception to. Sure, I get it. Executive motor functions, everyone builds, it's called chunking, right? More complex movements over more granular movements. And the 10,000 hours things, yeah, once you do it 10,000 times or 10,000 hours, whatever it is, 10,000 hours, it becomes unthinking. Yeah, okay, there's something to that, of course. But I think there's, I think depending on the nature of what you do, how you do it, that could be a dangerous way to say things, very misleading. That's what I think.
So you had a very meticulous program yourself in the hours that you would invest per day, per week. Do you still see that there's some kind of an X factor? You've been around a lot of people that are very talented at what they do, not necessarily just skateboarding. But do you find that you sort of, regardless of the amount of time you invest, there's still an X factor there?
Sure. Different people have different gifts. Also, X factor is it's also dangerous because you think there's this black box, a magic black box that's going to be snapped into someone and make them special, you know? And I don't see that. I think we all have certain attributes like balance, strength, power, quickness. To me, I got a reasonable set of them. Nothing that spectacular, I think. I think I'm stubborn, you know? Being stubborn and easily amused are probably my biggest gifts. Because just the idea of just finding fun in the nuances of movement, that's a joy. I see people with all the talent in the world, and why don't they go all dressed up and no place to go, you know? And to me, that's the thing that kills me, and I see it all the time. I've seen thousands of kids certainly hundreds of kids over the years. I mean, I've been doing it 30 years, and they have all the attributes. They have more than I do, more courage, more strength, more. I see that clear as a bell, clear as a bell. And why don't they go anywhere? Because it's the thing behind that drives you. And I also see people with so many attributes that really do have that kind of talent. It's magical. It doesn't seem fair, it's the way things are, okay. But they don't have that yearning, they have that chase instinct. And we all have that. It's in everything we do. I mean, it's in conversation. You can. And they won't remove themselves outside enough to shine in a way that's what skateboarding is that's so special about it and conducive to innovation. It's a community of outsiders, a group that doesn't belong, a group of people that doesn't belong in groups, you know? Yeah. And so we individuate ourselves through what we do, and by the way we stand apart, we are embraced by the whole. And that gives us meaning. None of us are team sports guys. So what is the X factor? What is that? It's that yearning sense of I want to individuate and separate myself by what I do. The athleticism is a bar, but what really makes the guy special is when they have a skating that's representative of who they are. You see who they are by the way they skate, you know? And those are my favorite guys, always. So X factors is another term that, you know, I want to just smash.
Let's do that. What about values and ethics? Because that was something that was very ingrained within your family. There was a code of conduct there, and there was a way to approach things, and you didn't skate until the chores were done. So values and ethics, what role have they played now that you're at this point of having completed all these years that you have when you look back?
That's another good question. There are a lot. I think it's an old cheesy movie. I still remember it vividly. One of the Conan movies. Arnold, right? And James Earl shooting the snakes. And so he's this big barbarian guy. He's Arnold. And he's raped and pillaged and won, and he's got success. And that says the biggest test of a man is success, not the trials that get you to it. And for sure, I see that. So when you talk about ethics and things, it's the one thing I see amongst the gnarliest guys. Everyone knows I wouldn't call them cocky, but you have to be sure of yourself to do what you do, to some extent. But humility. You see that in the best guys, the gnarliest guys. You notice like a genuine humility. It's not a false humility. It's like, oh, shucks, I can't do that. And then that's false. It's just a genuine, heartfelt humility. Like Tony Hawk has it. All these guys, the gnarliest guys have that. That's something where you're never really satisfied by what people would put at your feet, because that will stop you and rob you of all that you've worked for. You know?
There's a high propensity of that humility in the Bones Brigade, that core group of kids, and an incredible mix. Stacey Peralta, who pulled the team together, seemed to have an uncanny ability to select talent and to select, you know, talent that had some of those values that would see them through the course of their career. Mm-hmm. Can you comment a little bit about the team and just those core values of those members?
Mm-hmm. Another bad movie reference. X-Men. Did you see X-Men? Yeah. You know, these mutants, and they're just mutants. And they're mutants. Everything you think of as a mutant. And they don't belong. But they know they shine in a certain way. They've got something, kind of gift. And put us in a group together. And you had that mutual sense of belief that though we were all different, we shared something special, and therefore we belonged. I think about this, that knowing some of the more creative and driven people I think the biggest obstacle to creativity is being able to punch through that barrier of disbelief. And I see that all the time, or very often, that, you know, we film all the time. And so you publish something on some video, YouTube, whatever, gets around. Next thing you know, some guy in wherever, Madagascar, is doing it better than you do. And it's not so much that he learned how from the video, it's that he learned you could do it. And because the tricks usually aren't a stretch for the imagination. And so what Stacey did, he believed in us, and he put an environment where we would look at our teams and we think, I see what he has, it's different, and I want my place. And I don't have anyone chomping at what I have. And there was all these slots. And that was one of the biggest things, is he knew how to speak to us, endow us with a sense of belief.
Very cool. Well, if anyone's just kind of dabbled, like ridden a skateboard a couple of times, or even watched some of the really early footage of skateboarding, maybe even Dogtown Z-Boys and things like that, I think to the average person it kind of looks like a two-plane kind of an operation. You've got a flat surface board with wheels, and you've got a flat ground or an arched ground. But when you came in, you just seemed to have that vision to see that every surface, including the outside of the wheels and the backside and the ends, could be ridden and something could be done with that. Do you see, not just skateboarding, but is that something that you found you kind of see in life? Do you see the alternative angles to things? Because I know you study quantum physics and that sort of thing. Is it sort of a natural skill that you have to see different angles and different planes of things?
Maybe, I don't know. I get lost a lot. And that's I'm always lost. Maybe it has something to do with that. But I don't know. I just know I never wanted to be judged by going lockstep with somebody else.
Do you ever amaze yourself with some of the moves that you invent?
I amaze myself at what I don't get. I see kids all the time. Another reference, that Wile E. Coyote, I never studied law, whatever, when he's defying gravity. Someone said that. It's like, I never studied law. And I see kids do, I'm like, how does he do that? Because it's perfect. I don't have that. And I think it's the ability, it may not be that he's whole in that guy, he's just some kid, but he has some sub-movement and the ability to see those little nuances of motion and how they catenate, how they connect together. The tricks that we have are all built of component pieces. And it's very much like a language with a sense of syntax, or the way we build words from phonemes. There are rules. And the same, they're very physical rules, how things fit together. There's a grain to which you have to conform, to a degree. Yeah, you can force things, and they look it, But it's the ability to catch those things, And that's something, it's an endless fun, and never overestimate yourself, I should say. Is that the right way to say? Yeah, because often you're surprised by people that, like, where did he get that,
You've done a couple of TED Talks, and I know I watched one of them, and you speak about context shaping content, which I guess applies not only to your environment, but also sort of your life as well. When you moved out of freestyle skating and started to make that transition into what we know as modern street skating, how did you see that coming out, the context and the content?
It was huge. So the kind of skating I did, sorry, I don't look because the kind of skating I did was confined to just simple flat. It was learning an alphabet devoid of really anything to apply it, in a sense. And when people be upset and say, why did you say it died? But it died. There's guys that do it, and that's good. It should be that. But street skating is what took over, and that was what was taking those tricks and applying it to the environment around us, and there are never-ending combinations. In that context of mapping that which we are all familiar with onto new environments, there are endless ways, the combinatorics of it, the ways it can combine in different senses, and hitting new obstacles will sometimes sort of inject this momentum set that will change the rest of the trick. And that is just endless. And that is what creates this multidimensional web for us all that we get caught in and can't sort of escape.
For the guys on the Bones Brigade team who were focused on vert skating on the ramp, did you watch them with the same kind of fascination, or could you see the same extrapolation of moves that was possible on the vertical scale, or did you always just kind of see it in the context of, you know, flat and street?
Really good question again. Tony is a good friend, Tony Hawk, and I would go. Oh, you can't. Oh, thank you. Tony Hawk is a good friend, and so one of the things that I enjoyed most was going down for these Del Mar contests, and I would watch him skate. And so would I see things that he did that opened my eyes to what I did? Yes, to some extent, although of course he's flying around, so that was fairly limited. But the flip side of that is it's the funnest thing to me about watching him was never to make the trick, it was how fast he would bracket. Everyone's doing, you're always falling too far to one side or the other until you make it. And he would bracket each error so rapidly. And I would watch him going, gosh, with all of his gifts based on what I do. What it did was it lifted out in the environment that I naturally make assumptions, right? We're blind because we're too familiar with things. But when you take it out of context a little bit, suddenly you see things about what you do, you're like, I got it. So in this way, he informed me about what I did, not necessarily by the tricks because he's flying around, but because of the way he mapped, the way he constrained movements and how fast he would do. It inspired me and lifted me. So,
what about the reimagination of things? Because when you change the style of skating that you're doing, or even as you age and perhaps you have to change your own personal style, how do you reimagine your sport?
Another good question is, there are a lot of facets to that. How do we reimagine our sport? And so, you know, when you say imagine, you mean projecting into the future that which has not yet been done, but you expect it to be there, right?
I think that's what I meant.
I think that when I see the guys now, skateboarding over time has integrated transitions. I don't know, used to call it stunts, where it's just big rails, big stairs, tech skating, and they have interwoven all of them in a way that's forced us to look at our own limitations. We learn from the other guys. And so I think, again, in this way, when so much has been done, and you can say, yeah, of course, it's finite. There's only so many things you can do. And to an extent, that's true. Okay, do it backwards. All right, what do we do to break that mold? And that's a big part of it. But I think, again, the recombining of different environments is one thing, but another is embracing the sort of, there is a little bit of a cultural element to each facet of skating. You pick it up for sure. And embracing each other within as it grows, and those guys take it further out. That is something that is, in a sense, stretches the imagination. It's the motive force. It's what boosts us forward. I think the progress we make is due to that more than anything else, due to just trying to imagine new ways you can flip your board, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Well, you took it all the way back to the basics again, many, many years after becoming quite accomplished in the sport. You broke down your own stance and went all the way back to the beginning. Can you explain a little bit about what spurred that process and how you went about it?
Just desperate people do desperate things, you know? And that in itself, you know, what are the biggest attributes of creativity and innovation? Desperation, you know? I see that a lot. So skateboarding as a culture, it kind of is a throttled desperation I see amongst the guys. What kind of person heaves themselves down 20-stair rails, you know? There's some inner desperation in there. You see that often. It's rare that you meet just some guy that's just, you know what I mean? That's how it comes out. And so what happened to me after all the years is it's weird, you know? I pictured myself, as a lot of us do, getting taken out in one big bang. Just grinding to a halt. And I had a lot of scar tissue, and it wrapped around so much so the doctor said it was akin to car crash victims when they get in front-end collisions. And their femurs slam into their pelvises and things shatter. And the body has a way of naturally binding itself together. So I went to the East Coast, and they took a bunch of pictures because my femur was grinding into my hip socket. And they said it'll calcify and lock, a natural weld itself together, and it did. He was right. And so he looked at me with eyes like he couldn't say that it was done for me, but his eyes said it. And so he showed me how I work, and that you can tear this stuff. There's something called myofascial release if you jam things in you. So like any skater, I got home, and there was this nice little tool, so how can I amplify this thing? And I went from like screwdrivers and taping the end so you don't break the skin, and I went to fire hydrants and trailer hitches and screws and fence posts, and finally dangling out of the wheel well of my car and tearing using my frame. And after, I think, about 2 years of that, it's gnarly, you vomit and stuff, and you break it all, it breaks like weeds. It's horrible. And it grows back so fast. It's crazy. But I finally, one night in the valley, valley is this crazy place. It was cold one night, and I was hanging upside down from my wheel well in my car. About 1:30 in the morning, cops would come because I'd be screaming. They thought I'd be mugged, you know. And I was pulling on the frame of my car until I heard this thump. I've broken a good number of bones, you know. A lot of fingers and toes and ribs, and even a collarbone. They break like pencils. But this thing broke like a tree branch. Just this thump. And you get that high if you ever broken stuff. You get like a heat. And I was like, oh, and I'm just dangling. I got tears and snot on my hand. And I pulled myself out once the numbness went away, and I stood up. And it moved. It didn't move like a stick shift. It moved like a real ball and socket again. I was like, I can do it. And as I did, something had dawned on me, because we were just flesh and bone. We have these sort of thick wetsuits of flesh around a really little skeleton. That's all we are. And so the very nature of stance and skateboarding is you do any gyrating motion in clothes and you get bound up. That's the nature of stance. Our skin, our flesh molds around due to the pull of the muscles. And by jamming stuff in for those years, I started to re-rotate and get things straight again. And I was erasing the very stance, because the software part that's in our head, the learning, that's easy. It's just a response. It all comes through our body. And as it started to bind up, and then I started to release it, I realized, wow, I have access to stuff that I didn't even realize. I thought there was just one way of doing this, but I learned in a stunted way, a transmogrified, retarded way, you know? And I think that I can do something better. If I'm 47, I'm not pretending to be Peter Pan or whatever. If I can do something more with what I've been given, and it's just something beautiful of taking what is so dear to you that you know so well, and seeing it for the first time, like with freshness. I didn't know there are other ways to do this, and it's just joy for me. So maybe I filmed a few things, and I'll start filming again in about 3 or 4 weeks. Wow, and,
pretty cool. Yeah. You talked a bit about passion. I saw this picture in your book. Stacey, he was actually handing out per diems, I think, for the team here. But somebody asked Stacey Peralta, because he's a wonderful filmmaker, and they asked him, what is the key to making successful films? If you had to pick one thing, what is it? And he said, don't chase the money, chase your interest. Or I think I sort of read that to be sort of your passion, or that thing that humanly connects you to other people's stories. And you've talked a little bit about the passion. How have you maintained that for so long? Because obviously your life evolves, you evolve, your skating evolves. What keeps the passion alive?
Another profound question. I mean, it really is. At West Point, there's a lot of studies of another abstraction of that, and I don't think that they have any answers either. I think A lot of people do things for fame and money. And that's part of it. It's good to be loved. I love to be loved. And everyone needs money. It's good to have some money. But they become sort of, okay, I'll say something material, another movie reference, probably just as bad. And then I'll reel it back to something a little bit worthwhile. And it was called The Firm, I think, that movie. And I haven't seen it in a long, long, long time, but Ed Harris, he's Ed Harris, right? You gotta love Ed Harris. And they're watching dogs around a track, running. And he goes, you know, one day they chased this little mechanical rabbit. One day the rabbit broke, dog caught the rabbit. They could never get the dog to run again. I see that again and again and again and again and again. Guys who have what they do in skateboarding, professional skateboarding, amateur, let that level, it's crazy what they put on the line. The kind of dedication and focus, and I love my community. There's no other community I'd want to belong to. And the thing that kills me most, having had a company and run a company and knowing these guys that have given up so much, and they are going to hurt when it gets old, when they get old. And what their attitude, everything about them is about overcoming. They can overcome anything, and hence they get to these levels. High octane stuff. And the thing that ends up inevitably taking it away is the subtlety that comes wrapped up in a gift. There's often fame and money, or the things you thought you wanted most, because by the time you get them, you see for the dumb idols what they really are. You know? Oh, I want to be recognized. I want to be on TV. I want to. And then once you get that, you realize, no, just that glint in the eye I see of my peer who acknowledges me, that's, again, more than lines of people. Because they know, you know? And the same with money, or what drives us comes from within. And by the time you identify it as something material or outside, and you touch it, it just turns to ashes. And so I think the thing that's allowed me, everyone, no one gets out unscathed, you know? Everyone has to go through these bumps and zigzag their way. But I think as I've gotten older and seeing the guys who have had it, like Tony Hawk, whom I respect so much, he's had everything more than anybody else could have it, and he still drives himself like that. That's not for fame or money, because he's had plenty of that, and he's still doing it. Because he just identifies it with the soil that makes him who he is. It's just who he is. And if you can strip it of its, I don't know, of its name, then you've identified its true essence. Just the love of the soil within you, you know? And that's
Thank you. You speak about your community. This is a really small community out here on the North Shore. A lot of our kids skate and surf, but surf is a big driver. And a lot of them are very competitive and looking forward to exploring that side of their careers. Having done so many of those aspects of exploring a sport and also pursuing a pretty rigorous education and still pursuing that on your own terms today, is there any kind of advice that you would share with the younger members in the audience tonight about maybe finding balance or keeping things in perspective? I know you don't like to be preachy, and that's not the question, but you know, with the perspective that you have, having competed, having been very successful, having run a fabulous company that you sold for a lot of money, I mean, the material successes are all checked off, but when you look back at it all years down the track, what is that kind of balance that you can see clearly to share with the younger people?
Again, profound and hard. Because by the time you identified it for something static, because it's different for everyone, what drives us, by the time you've identified it for something static, you've already taken something from its essence. So in one sense, I'm afraid to do it, but in the other sense, I won't play games and say I'll leave it at that, because the truth is there is something static about it, at least in form. A lot of us, especially in the skateboard community, oh, I'm not competitive. Dude, we're all competitive. All of us are. It doesn't matter. Like, we're competitive at saying how not competitive we are. You know, it's my friend does this. I'm the humblest guy I know, you know? And it's just funny. Everything can turn into a contest of conquest. And so having said that, is the guys that I love to see, the ones that you know, are going to be, is the ones who do well in contests. The guys who win, or the guys who give it their all, depending on whatever level they did their best, and it was good. I've won so many contests, and they are hollow, like hollow. I want to just heave the trophy because I just played it safe, you know? Just no one happened to be there that beat me that day. That's for whatever reason, but I got a lot of hollow victories. So it's about doing your best. But the guys that I see that really last are the ones who just afterwards, they don't go party, they go back out. You can always count on those guys. They're going to be around. You know, it doesn't mean that if you don't do that, but that's a good sign. And don't let the rigors, again, don't let the chase instinct that contests are often about, right? You're chasing each other. It's some form of race. It's some form of quantifiable, that guy did that guy higher, or whatever. Some metrics. Don't let that overcome you, because you'll become a slave to that, and it's a treadmill, and it'll take you down, and you'll end up fighting the treadmill more than the limits of your own mind, you know? So don't let your chasing instinct over, because that's so natural. Oh, I got to be that guy. I got to be the other. Don't be that guy. Run from that guy, you know? Let him inspire you. Let his spirit, you know? I had that. There's guys that I know, they've got that lion heart, and I want that, but I'm just not going to follow their footsteps, because then I'll just be them, and who cares about that? We already have that, you know? And so I don't become a slave to that or people's opinions or a number, because I did that. I did that. Conscious of it, I became a slave to that. I still became a slave. So it's hard. And it's real. You can't philosophize and say, oh, I'm above it. No, you're not. You know, you'll get caught up, because that's the nature of it. But just don't let it overtake what lifts you out there to get you out there every day and overtake your dreams. When you start dreaming of beating a guy, that's when defeat is soon, to me, you know? Yeah.
We're going to let the movie roll in a moment, but I'm curious to know what you were hoping when they invited you to be a part of this movie and to revisit this period of Bones Brigade. What were you hoping the film would either portray or achieve, and did it meet your hopes for it?
Another good question. Stacy first called me. I'm pretty mellow, you know, mellow, easy. I have enough thorns. I had done an interview in the East Coast, and it was one of the only interviews where I took the guy's tape and threw it, because he was painting this picture, this revisionist history of why things were so great back then, this precious little box that we have and nobody else can, you know, stripping away all the aspirations of dreams of all these kids just learning. Like, he was going to publish that. And I was so frustrated. That's one of the only ones I've ever walked out of. I flew home, I was in the cab, and I get a call from Stacy. And none of us had, he does his own thing. We all love him, we know that's there, but you know, years go by. And I get a call from Stacy. I'm like, wow. You know? And he tells me what he's going to do, to an extent. I'm doing this documentary, I want you. And me, I was still in that rotten mode, you know? Because I'm so terrified of capturing the parameters that make things of the past, capturing the parameters that qualify the past, the distinctiveness of the past. And having that box up, again, the same idea of saying we had it so great and you won't, you can't, because our time was special. Blanker canvas? Yes. Special time? Yes. But I can't be involved, it's going to do that. And Stacy, there was this long pause, pregnant pause. And he goes, I promise you I won't do it. And we had very little lead up. We just walked in, did the interview. I did 1.5 interviews. That was it. We didn't see. And so we didn't know what each other were doing. I'd call Tony, Tony, what do you know? Nothing. And it's terrifying, terrifying night of the premiere, because as many times as screen, I'm still scared, you know, because we're showing, and this is where I'm going, did it portray what you wanted to portray? Yes. It showed the spirit that is independent of time, that can manifest in any circumstances, in any time frame, in any environment. It showed the spirit of the individuals in their difference, camaraderie, drive, internal sense of failure, because we all have that. We're all plagued by demons. Lance has torn me apart. I never knew that, what you'll see. So did it show what? It showed the inside of us, and then us as a group. And that is timeless.
Very good. Well, I'm looking forward to letting it roll, but before we do, Rodney, I know you've got a lot of choices on where you can be, and we're so happy that you chose to be here tonight. It's really a pleasure for us. Thank you.